Welcome everyone to Gentian's weekly Wednesday program. We maybe call it our weekly Wednesday workshop. We got to get a better name for that coming up, but I want to welcome you all in. It's a beautiful day, so there's probably only 50 or 60 of you watching this versus the 300 or 400 that normally do. So I just want to welcome you that have taken the time to come out on this beautiful day, come inside, grab your coffee, grab your mug, sit down, and really relax for this program. Anyway, I want to thank you all for that. So I like to start with something funny. A lot of times, just like my junior achievement, I want to start with something kind of get you off in the right mood. I know one thing that you guys have been talking to us a lot about is what I've been doing inside. A lot of you guys said you're doing puzzles, and you've sent them to me. I've seen them. So I decided that I was going to do a puzzle. So the cool thing about it, I want to tell you, I completed my first puzzle, and it took me 1 week, which I think is really good. The box said it was 2 to 4 years. Another one, too, just to begin, is, a lot of people will talk about giving blood and how much that is needed, and it kind of reminds me of a story. A priest, a minister, and a rabbit walked into a blood bank, and the rabbit said, "I think I'm type O." They get type O. Anyway, I wanted to start with a couple of dad jokes. So thank you guys all again for tuning in. How is Gentian's fiscal health? What's happening at Gentian is a beginning just in the housekeeping here. So what I want to do with that is, the big question we are getting is, what are we going to do? What's going to happen after this? What about the team? What about us getting back together? So I know that I've talked to 22 of the top advisors at Raymond James and have all their plans. And there's anything from tomorrow they're going to open up to meeting with clients, and they're bull rushing into it. And then I've got others who've actually said they will never meet clients face-to-face again. So you're seeing two wildly opposite ends of this. We tend to take a more measured approach to this. We are mostly concerned with your health. So the face-to-face meetings we may be a bit longer in, but we don't want to be a carrier of something that makes you sick. So when we go through that, we want to be both proactive, smart, but we also want to be measured in that too. So as we look together, the first will be when the orders come out for the state and we're able to get ourselves back to working together here in the building, because we've got about 4 of us who are away now. And I think once we get that back together, we'll start to see how that works. We'll start to see maybe a client meeting or two, if needed. But I do think that having some of these Zooms is going to be an important piece. But I want to let you know, we're putting plans together on how that may occur with no definite dates, because we wanted to follow after most of the federal and the state guidelines, which have no dates applied to them. So at any rate, we just wanted to give you an idea. We're looking at that as well. We're blessed as well. We plan like you do. So when we're putting these plans together for you, we plan for times like these for our business. So you're hearing a lot of bankruptcies. This week, I think the Gap went under. I think Neiman Marcus also filed for bankruptcy. You're going to see more and more of those because their cash flow, their necessary cash flow has been really, really eaten up while there's not business. So we really do have to have some sort of recovery for this. You've seen Kohl's drop from 70 to 18 or 17. So interesting to watch, but you're seeing some pretty interesting pieces out there when you're finding those. So our health here, we're pretty blessed. We've prepared for these and planned for this, and I think this is kind of one of those skinny times that you have to get through. So we're looking at our needs, wants, and wishes budgets as well, and really heavily working on our needs here right now versus spending on the wants and wishes. So at any rate, I wanted to make sure, just assure you that we're blessed, our fiscal health is fine to get through this kind of time, and we are operating as normal with our team. So the couple of things as well is a housekeeping. We're going to, in this housekeeping section, we're going to start sending out a questionnaire. What we want to do is to get to know you better. While you're there, while you have time, you're going to start to see this in waves. The questionnaire is literally called Getting to Know You Questionnaire. It's going to have different questions on it. It's not all encompassing, but it's got things on it such as, what is your favorite treat or dessert? Do you have allergies? A couple questions. Is there anything you'd like us to know about you that you haven't shared before? What I've also looked on here as well is there anything or any story that you'd like us to know about you? Today's going to be a lot about stories. Ken and I will talk about those. But what I want you to do is give those and share those with us. So for instance, what's my favorite color? Purplish, I said. Favorite music genre. I'm going to share mine first, but it's a good chance for us to get to know each other better. We just want to understand who you are and what makes you tick. So you'll see that coming out. Ashley and the team have that being sent out in waves. We'll remind you over the next couple of weekly Wednesdays as well. but I wanted to give you that piece as well. A lot of you also have signed on online for the first time, which is great. We see those come in when you do. So be sure to use that because there's a secure vault on there as well. When we have appointments or you want to put documents in, we can share documents on there too. I was going to say one thing back to that questionnaire. I think the first wave that you're going to see for the Get to Know You questionnaire comes out May 15th. That'll be the time frame for the first wave of the Getting to Know You questionnaire. So a couple of things as well. The women's event that we had and we talked about last Wednesday on our podcast or webcast, if you will, was done on Thursday. And thank you to all who attended. It was a wonderful event, a lot of great connections, needed connections. We got some great feedback on that as well. So again, I leave that to the women on our team, and they do a wonderful job. And most of them are looking heavily towards the next one to connect as well with more and more of you. So next time that comes out, I think it'll be monthly. A couple requested every bi-weekly, but I think they're going to do monthly right now. Please join in for that as well. We really can't wait to do the next one. Another portion here is we're going to start really with stories. And what I want to do to begin with here is kind of tell you a story that I heard that illustrates something. Most of us don't feel maybe that our story is that important, but I'm gonna give you something here, and let's just go with this story real quick. First of all, let me give you a setting here. A water bearer in India had 2 large pots, both hung on both ends of a pole, which he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water. At the end of the long walk from the stream to the house, the cracked pot always arrived half full. The poor cracked pot was ashamed of its own imperfection and miserable that it was unable to accomplish only half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what it perceived to be a bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream, said, "I am ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you. I've been able to deliver only half my load because this crack on my side causes water to leak out all the way back to the house. Because of my flaws, you have to do all this." The water bearer said, "It's okay. I knew this, and I planted seeds of flowers along the path on your side. And every day, you've watered them and provided great joy for everyone to follow this path and our journey home." Just to give you a sample, what may be your flaws might be seen as strengths if you look at them the right way and frame them. So stories are very important because stories are important in how you say them. They're important to find out if anyone is interested in you, and also people only connect to you once they get to know you. So if you're just walking around on a surface, you're not going to get a whole lot of deep connection with people. So it's a great story that just illustrates sometimes our own flaws and the vulnerability that we let out for people is how we connect deeply. Now, a couple of things I know Ken was talking about in stories, so I'll maybe push that over to Ken.
Yeah, when Chris is talking about stories and we talk about, why don't we why are we just walking on the surface sometimes? I'm guilty of this once in a while. I'll be very vulnerable in this message right now. Sometimes we don't think our stories are good enough for people. Sometimes you don't think your story is as interesting as someone else's story. And we get into this comparative mode of, wow, you did this, but geez, I only did this over here, right? And so sometimes we don't feel as confident in our story as we should be. We talk about cracks in the pot, right? I mean, my parents were divorced when I was 10 years of age. That's a pretty big crack, right? And some people are able to talk about that, some people are not. So what is your story? What is our story? Is anyone interested in listening to our story? And the answer is yes. I will say this, though. My kids are learning something about full body listening. It's not just with our ears or eyes, it's with our body, it's being attentive. And what I've noticed is that when someone is vulnerable to me and they're telling me something very, very important to them, if I'm like this, yeah, that's interesting, yeah, oh, yeah, I'm not full body listening. It really has them uneasy to begin with if they're saying something vulnerable. So make eye contact, be full body listening to that story, because it's going to give that person who is telling you the story and being vulnerable, it's going to give them that confidence that they need. It's called full body listening. So that one's for my kids at home because we're learning about that right now.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ken. A couple of things as well is that I think a client was talking about this just recently. He said, Chris, I ran out of toilet paper, so I began using old newspapers. It's just, the times are rough. At any rate, love some of those as well. Just so you know, due to quarantine, I'll only be telling inside jokes. So just as an FYI. So a couple other things. My wife cut my hair this weekend, which was really, she did a fantastic job, I felt. The funny thing was it took like an hour and 15 minutes because she cut like that much off every time she did, which is great, but did a phenomenal job. Also, yesterday was her birthday. So we had a 5-course, 6-hour meal yesterday, started at about 1 o'clock, and I paired that through the rest of the year, and I realized that's cooking and cleaning, to all of you who do that, is amazing. It's incredible work, it's fun, it's fulfilling, but it takes a long time. So thank you to all who do that for us as well. Just to kind of give you an idea into the mindset category of what we're talking about now, a couple of words that we're going to add. Obviously, gratitude is something we've talked about, and Ken last time also talked about what's important now. So framing some of those things are really super important to us as well, but we've got 2 words to kind of add today. Maybe I should just go one at a time, but the 2 words I'm going to talk more about are wonder and forgiveness. So very interesting when you look at this, and I think wonder and forgiveness are very, very important to us. You know, forgiveness, for example, without it, we can be bound by, without forgiveness, we can be bound by our captor, or we can take control of our own feelings. So what's really interesting about this, and I've read a lot about forgiveness, is it's very difficult, and I've heard some incredible stories when you're looking at things like apartheid, about things like, the Dyer van Frank, many also, some of the, Viktor Frankle, some of the books you'll find in Auschwitz, how people were able to forgive their captors immediately, forgive people who'd killed their children immediately and very quickly. It's an amazing thing, but it's an incredible gift eventually once you can do it, as I've read it. So forgiveness becomes very, very important. You can either, and this is what people want to do when something does something to them, they either want to retaliate and pay back, and that just continues the hurt, or they can forgive and move on and make the world a better place. It takes self-awareness and confidence and the desire not to be right. So when you look at that, forgiveness becomes very important. A lot of you shared those stories of forgiveness with me where maybe you weren't at odds with a family member, a child, or somebody else. And I think the very, very, very cool thing is when you have told me that person has come back to you after you've forgiven them or they've forgiven you. Those are just heartwarming to us here as well. So that was really, really a big portion to us. I think Mother Teresa once said, and this is pretty an interesting piece, so about helping people and helping with forgiveness and all as well. Mother Teresa said, never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time and always start with the person nearest you. Couldn't that be more true now? That's just one way I see it. Also, put a positive spin on things. Cheer up. It could be worse. This is a good one here. So my friend said this to me. Cheer up, man. It could be worse. You could be stuck in an underground hole full of water. I know he means well. At any rate, just thought I'd throw a little humor in there as well. But I think one of the important things that we've got, the second word is wonder. You ever walk outside and you just get that feeling of, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. It takes practice because the world doesn't fill us with wonder. The world fills us with ordinary and routine and repetitiveness that kind of numbs us from this. But really, when you look at wonder, can you retain the wonder that's inside of you as a child? For instance, Ken has 4 children, and the cool thing that Ken gets to see is how they approach the world. Ken, how does wonder approach that?
When you have 4 kids, I mean, it's interesting to see through their eyes. Everything's a journey. Everything's a surprise. Running outside, we actually have a little bird. We have a robin nesting right in our playground, our play set. And it's right by a swing, and that bird, the mom bird, stays right in there. And we've been watching these little birds hatch, but they have such a wonder. And if you've ever done a Zoom call, so this is a little something different. Have you ever done a Zoom call with a child that's pretty young, and they're looking at the screen, and they're wondering why they can't touch you, and why they can't, and some of them actually go around the screen and look like if you were on the other side of it, right? That's wonder, right? That's curiosity to it all. That's the preciousness of it all, and that's what the wonder is. And I wonder for you, I wonder about you, what are you looking forward to coming up? When things go back to whatever normal is, what are you looking forward to? What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it that you're missing right now that you wish you had again? I wonder for that, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. For me, it's going up to Saint Germain. We talk about it, our kids talk about it every single day. It's a family tradition we've done. We go up to Saint Germain. We rent a cabin for a week on the lake, and we have a pontoon boat up there we rent. And they talk about fishing. They talk about playing on the sand. They talk about the family tradition. And that's what we're looking forward to. But I wonder what you're looking forward to as well. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. That's awesome as well. What's interesting too is when you look at wonder, can you retain the wonder that's inside of you as a child? What can you be amazed by? So I love to do empowered questions. Empowering questions are this. What can you be amazed by? That's what wonder is. You walk out and it's like, oh my gosh. So the thing I've got is you see things in a different light. Be amazed at how things work. Attempt to be wonderful to somebody else. You see these kind of all go in the same line. So I'll give you an exercise. Step out in your backyard and look at the amazing interconnection of nature just right there. You ever stop to think and then forget to start? To some of you, I know that happens. So as we go through as well, that's just some of the philosophy. I know to some of you, you love the mindset portion of what we talk about. Some of you want some of the market section as well. So I'm going to introduce the market section here with a quote. This comes from Paul Krugman. I'm doing a master class. I've been about 6 or 7 master classes. One was on Mexican cooking yesterday, but Paul Krugman I'm about 3 or 4 or 5 lessons into out of 18. And here's a great statement he made. Economics is separating what you want to be true from what is actually true. Think about that. That is absolutely correct. So you've got to be very careful in economics because there's a lot of opinions, but there are a lot of things that remain fairly true about human behavior. With that, I'm going to pass over some of the market discussion to Ken.
Yeah, so some of the market updates that we've been through in the last 7 days, about 12 meetings with our portfolio managers. Peter's really spearheaded this on our team, and we've sat in and he's updated us and briefed us on that. What's interesting that we find out is a couple things we hear from you is, what about gold? We've heard that a couple times. We really understand the idea of risk-reward. We understand not taking too much risk in a portfolio. Are we getting paid for the risk we're taking with the investments we're looking at? We're always looking at these pieces to see if they really make sense for you, and we understand that piece very well. The other piece that we were very pleasantly surprised to hear about, maybe not surprised, but good to hear about, was there's actually a net inflows to most of the funds that you own. Now, what that means in English is that people are putting money into these funds, not necessarily taking money out. That's one of the, call it 100 points of criteria that we look at. Why is that important? Because if a fund has a net distribution, meaning that the money's leaving the fund, that puts pressure on the managers to maybe sell something that they don't necessarily want to sell right now. What we're seeing is net inflows. That means that the managers have enough for distributions if people are taking money out of that fund for whatever reason, also to take advantage of opportunities as well. I mentioned the tide being out. There's a plethora of seashells out there. These managers, because there's net inflows to these funds, they can pick up those seashells that they want and put them in the portfolio for you as well. So that's a very, very positive thing that we've seen is the net inflows piece as well. To get a little more technical, this is from JP Morgan, more on the overall markets update. Growth still leads the way. It really is. This last week, values kind of led the way back up, especially on the small cap value side of things. But when you look at the overall trend right now, for year to date, which is the first, call it 4 months of the year, growth is still very much in favor. There's growth and value. Those are the two really cycles that we go through in the market, and growth is still leading the way by far. Now, how long will that continue? We're not quite sure. But what we do know is that we rebalance, and we're rebalancing you between those two positions for years and years and years now. So when you look at year to date, this is a little more on the technical side, but I think this is pretty fun. When you look at what JP Morgan's put together here, technology is the least of the dirty laundry, if you will, for this year so far. I don't think that's any surprise. Energy, to no one's surprise probably, you see the gas pump, $1.26, now it's up to $1.58. Energy has led the way down so far this year, being down 30, almost 40%. Consumer discretionary, I found that one to be interesting. It's actually towards the upper end of being okay this year. It's down 7.2, where the overall markets right now are down about 12. That's interesting because consumer discretionary is more like the casinos, more of like the things that when people have extra money, they spend money on. So it's really interesting to see that one holding up. I wouldn't have guessed that one. That's why we never know. There are no future facts. One last piece, and I'll hand it back over to Chris, is when you look at the key interest rates, this is something we look at very, very keenly. The 30-year Treasury right now, as of May 1st, is trading at 1.27%. That is viewed as what we call safe money. A lot of the industry experts say that the 30-year Treasury is quote-unquote safe money. CD rates just renewed. I just talked to a client the other day. CD rates are renewing at 1.14%. That's the safe money. Here's the interesting part, is that when you look at the stock market, the overall stock market, the dividend yield, so that means that if your investment stayed flat, didn't appreciate or depreciate, the dividend yield is 2.06% right now. So we are getting paid more for owning equities from a dividend standpoint and from a yield standpoint than quote unquote what the safer money is out there. I know Chris has mentioned this a few times. This is a key point. This is why we own stocks. If you take a look at some of the highest dividend yielding categories, it's emerging markets almost at 3%, and right below that is international markets. So again, if these markets stay flat, we get the dividend yield. It's very important to why we own stocks. We're getting paid more to own stocks over the long run just from a dividend standpoint rather than just an appreciation or depreciation standpoint.
Thank you, Ken. A couple other things that are going to be important as well is on Thursday, Friday last week, we listened to 16 hours of taxation with Ed Slott. It was a great piece, if you will. It was riveting, talking about beneficiaries, beneficiary planning, Secure Act, the CARES Act. It's great. It's an important piece that we have, but if I have a couple of maybe colored marks on my forehead, it's because during them I actually did fall asleep and hit my head a couple times, just so you know. But we go through those. Those are very important because it gives us perspective on how what you have is taxed. So it's not what you make, it's what you keep that's important. We also had 6 to 10 hours of other webinars that we had that were of various sources, and these are very, very important to let you know. There's a ton of stuff. We try to really put it into one section here in 30 minutes and then share different pieces with you as we can along the way. Another piece is on a webinar just yesterday. Russell Investments has found that in 2020, the advisor value has risen from somewhere around 3 to around 4.81%, they said. Why is that? Why has advisor value gone up? Because this is a time when people make big mistakes. It's when people run for the exits when they shouldn't. So the interesting piece is that's their opinion, that's their research as they've gone through, but more importantly, having somebody by your side giving you advice, giving you comfort when you need it, giving you advice on different ideas to do as far as taxes, taking advantage of these, making lemonade out of lemons is a very, very important piece. So it's an interesting piece that did come out of a strong webinar yesterday. Another thing to remember as well is use your words carefully. And I brought this situation up to a client because it was, well, what do you mean? Well, if you look at an elevator, you've all been in an elevator, right? They've got one button that's up, one button that's down. And you're pretty willing to get into that, right? Yeah, I get in, I go up, I press the other button, I go down. It's pretty simple. What if the two buttons were named soar and plunge? How would you feel about getting into an elevator that had soar or plunge in it? Completely different, same exact idea though. One goes up, one goes down. So be very careful about the words that you use in this as well. The markets are recovering despite bad news. You're seeing there'll be 20 million people unemployed or more. We're going to find out Friday some of the news. But remember, who doesn't expect it to be absolutely horrible? Everybody I'm talking to in the neighborhood walks as well, that are social distance, are believing it's going to be worse and worse and worse. And we've had a few clients talk about that as well. So the perspective is, remember, the markets are looking ahead to the optimism of the opening of the economy, and they know the next 6 to 8 or 9 months of numbers could really, really, really be bad. So it's not surprised by that. The market and human emotion, again, is most hit by surprise, both upside and downside. Okay, that's in a super important pieces as well. When it comes to planning, again, I mentioned we did all the planning with Ed Slott on in their program on Thursday and Friday. There's a couple of different pieces maybe that Ken would like to bring from the Secure Act that we went through in that.
Yeah, I think a big one that they talked about is, we've talked about the contribution deadlines extended to July 15th. I think what a lot of the program was about was if we have a trust as a beneficiary. There's a lot of buzz about trust planning, wills planning, powers of attorney planning, a lot of estate planning that's being talked about right now. And we understand this piece very well. It depends if it's a conduit trust or an accumulation trust. It depends if it's a discretionary trust based on if your trust is the beneficiary of an IRA. Now, with the new rules, sometimes if those trusts aren't set up properly, this is why we have to coordinate with your estate planner. Some of those payouts will be done in 5 years, and that may not be your wishes. And now with the new laws of IRAs having to be emptied out by the 10th year, if you will, rather than being able to stretch over someone's lifetime, 30, 40 years, now it has to be emptied in the 10th year. That may not be your wish as well. So again, we've been doing some creative planning, and again, we'll have these conversations as moving forward. The last piece I want to talk about before I hand it back over to Chris is I want to talk about the mindset of the markets. Now, does a retired parent and their kids have the same mindset of what they want the market to do? I don't think so. And I've heard this over the last 2 or 3 months, and I just want to bring it to everyone's attention because I think it's a great piece, is that the mindset of a retired parent, you really don't want the markets to go down. We want them to stay stable. We know they have to go down to go higher, but we really want them to stay stable or go up, right? To preserve that nest egg we've accumulated that we have in retirement to keep it close to us, right? For the income for the rest of our lives. Now, that's different than the mindset of a 40-year-old. I turn 40 in a week from now, right? I actually want the markets to go down right now. That sounds very crazy, right? But we're buying stocks at a discount. There's two wildly different mindsets there. So if you're a retired parent and you're talking to your kids or grandkids about what's happening, just be careful on the message that we're sending to our kids, because I've talked to a lot of your children, and sometimes they get nervous being like, oh, geez, the markets are down. I'm kind of nervous about it. Well, that's because maybe you were talking about being nervous about it because you are in retirement, and we totally understand that piece, right? But for the kids' sake, they actually want that to happen, because if things are 25% off, we're buying sundresses or chainsaws or whatever your pleasure is, and things are 25% off, we can buy 4 sundresses, right, or chainsaws, and we get the 5th one free basically because it's 25% off. Same thing with stocks. We buy 4 shares now, we basically get the 5th one for free. That's what's happening when the markets are going down and we're still contributing. So just wanted to bring out that mindset, because it's two different mindsets. And so be really positive around your kids, saying, yeah, this is great. Markets are going down. Now's the time to invest. We all know that, but it's an important message to get through.
So a couple of the questions, thanks, Ken. A couple of the questions we've been getting to. I had a client call me last week and say, hey, did I hear that I can take $100,000 out of my IRA and pay no tax? No, that's the answer. No, that's not true. Right now, you can take $100,000 out of an IRA with no 10% penalty if you are affected, but there's 5 criteria if you're affected by COVID, and that's losing your job, actually being diagnosed with it. You'll see what the 5 are. We've sent a piece out about that. But you then can pay the tax spread over 3 years. So if you looked at that, A, he wasn't affected by that. B, didn't want to pay the tax over 3 years. It didn't make a big difference to them. But it's interesting. There's a lot of stories out there going on, hey, you can do this, you can do that. And there's a ton of laws going on. Some of the laws they're putting out there, like the PPP, they're creating rules on the back end of it after they've issued it. So you got to be really up on that, but that's what we study this for as well. So we've also seen a few people retired before they wanted to be. Some of our normal retirees are retiring, but there's some people being shifted in that later station of work that never thought they would be. So as companies are starting to kind of tighten their belts a bit as well. So just be prepared. Watch out for some of those 2 things as well. In closing, a couple of different items. This is a great quote. And this is, I've seen this as well. The way that people see things is always important, but you'll like this. On what principle is it that when we see nothing but improvement behind us, we are to expect nothing but deterioration before us? So let me say it again, because I really messed it up. On what principle is it that when we see nothing but improvement behind us, we are to expect nothing but deterioration before us? By the way, that was said by Thomas Babington Macaulay in 1830. It's absolutely crazy when you look at that. But those are some of the pieces. Now, one thing we understand is the stories. So Ken and I both had a couple of responses to the goalie story last time. So the goalie story as well, sometimes a goalie actually can cover exactly as much just staying in one spot and not moving as they can jumping from side to side. So you ask the goalie, well, why do you jump side to side? Well, because it looks like I'm doing something, even if standing in the middle would be just as effective. So it's an interesting piece. Sometimes the most effective thing is not to jump side to side, not to do things. So that was a big thing that Ken and I had also found as well. If it's interesting, I think one thing I want to tell you is, I've written quite a few poems. So I want to tell you a real short one I wrote. It's I dig, you dig, he digs, she dig, we dig, they dig. It's not a long poem, but it's deep. I have to give time for you to laugh and look at that and also to groan, so I understand that piece as well. There's probably one good piece as well I want to just kind of share with you in closing. I think one of the most important things is you and your appreciation for us and what we're doing. Thank you for doing that. We've been getting a lot of that to us. We really feel awesome about it. We're trying to get better at accepting it because a lot of times I know we deflect it, but we want to make sure, thank you tremendously for letting us know. You sharing your care for us has been extremely important. It motivates us to do better and better and better for you. So I just want to make sure you know that. But in closing, remember again, I want to tell you, we're serious about our guidance and we are heavily committed to you. Also, while wealth management is what we do, guiding people through adversity is who we are. So thank you on behalf of our entire team here at Gentian. And until next week, stay positive, stay safe, and be grateful. Thank you.